The night air was heavy, thick with the kind of quiet that only falls over towns like ours. Small, forgotten, and stuck somewhere in the past. You could walk down Main Street at midnight and hear nothing but the soft hum of the old streetlights, flickering like they were tired of living. The folks here had long grown used to the silence, a comfort that wrapped around you like a blanket. Until one night, that silence broke. It started subtly at first, little things no one paid much attention to. A dog barking wildly at an empty yard, the distant sound of footsteps echoing down an alleyway long after midnight. But then, on the first night, when the clock struck exactly 3 a.m., the town awoke to something they couldn't ignore. I was there, watching from the second-floor window of my old creaking house, unable to sleep as usual. At first I thought I was imagining it, a shadow moving through the graveyard at the edge of town. But then I saw another and another, zombies. The zombies moved slowly, purposefully, as though they had all the time in the world. My breath caught in my throat and I pressed my face against the glass, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Figures, pale and gaunt, were rising from the earth. The graves, those same old graves I'd passed by every day for years, were breaking open, releasing their long-buried inhabitants. Their eyes, if you could call them eyes, glowed faintly in the dark, filled with something far worse than hunger. It was hate. Cold, festering hate. I slammed the window shut and stumbled back, my heart racing, pulse pounding in my ears. But it didn't matter. They weren't just out there in the graveyard. I could hear them now, moving through the streets, making their way through town. The hollow echo of their steps carried through the night, growing louder with each passing second. The phone rang, startling me so violently that I nearly tripped over the chair behind me. I grabbed it, my hands shaking, and pressed it to my ear. "Are you seeing this?" a voice whispered on the other end. It was Laura from down the street, her voice trembling with fear. "Yes," I breathed, barely able to form words. What do we do?" Before she could answer, a loud bang echoed through my house. My blood ran cold. Someone or something was at my door. I held the phone tightly, pressing it to my ear as I crept toward the front of the house. My heart hammered in my chest, each beat threatening to give me away. The banging continued, louder this time, more insistent. The knob rattled, twisting back and forth as if whatever was on the other side was trying to force its way in. "Don't answer it," Laura hissed through the phone, as though she could sense what was happening. "Whatever you do, don't answer the door." I swallowed hard, frozen in place. I could hear it now, a whispering, low and guttural, coming from the other side of the door. It wasn't words, not exactly, but I could feel the malice behind them. Suddenly the banging stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, pressing down on me from all sides. I took a step back, then another, retreating into the dark safety of the hallway. Then, without warning, the door burst open and cold air rushed in. I didn't wait to see what was standing there. I turned and ran, my feet barely touching the ground as I raced upstairs and slammed the door to my bedroom behind me. I shoved a chair under the doorknob, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The whispers were back, but now they were inside. They slithered through the cracks in the walls, wrapping around my mind like tendrils of ice. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block them out, but it was no use. They were speaking to me, telling me things I didn't want to hear, things I had tried to forget. The phone buzzed again. I grabbed it, desperate for some kind of comfort, some kind of answer. But this time, it wasn't Laura's voice on the other end. It was something else, something that chilled me to my very core. "We're coming for you," it whispered, a voice that was both familiar and horribly, unnervingly wrong. "You thought you could bury the past, but it's not done with you." I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. The whispers grew louder, their words clear now. They knew. They knew what we had done, what the town had done. And now they were back to settle the score. The door to my bedroom creaked open, the chair scraping across the floor as it was pushed aside by some unseen force. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All I could do was watch as a figure appeared in the doorway, its face twisted into a grotesque, half-rotted smile. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone I had known once, long ago. Someone I thought I had left behind. "Remember me?" it asked, stepping closer, its voice dripping with malice. I stared, frozen in place, as the figure shuffled closer, its decayed features illuminated by the dim light filtering through the cracked window. The thing before me was no longer human, not really. Yet the face was unmistakable. My blood ran cold as memories I had buried deep within my mind began to surface, memories I had fought to forget. It was Roger. He had been dead for years. I had stood at his funeral, watched as they lowered his coffin into the ground. But now, here he was, standing in front of me, rotted and broken, yet somehow alive. The sickening stench of decay filled the room, and I gagged, choking on the rancid air. "Roger," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. "It can't be. You're dead." The thing that wore Roger's face let out a low, guttural laugh. Dead? It rasped. You think death is the end? No, it's just the beginning. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall as I tried to put distance between us. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. But there was no sense to be made. Roger had died, along with so many others. They had all been buried in that graveyard at the edge of town, and now they were coming back. We know what you did, Roger continued, his voice filled with venom. We all know. My breath hitched in my throat. This wasn't just a random nightmare brought to life. This was personal. The dead weren't rising for no reason, they were here for revenge. For me. Please, I begged, my voice cracking with fear. It wasn't my fault, we didn't have a choice. No choice? Roger's eyes gleamed with fury, his rotten teeth bared in a snarl. You made your choice the moment you turned your back on us. We trusted you. We all trusted you. I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. I didn't know it would go that far. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. I had known. We had all known. But fear, self-preservation, had driven us to do the unthinkable. Roger lunged forward, his decayed hand reaching for me. I screamed and scrambled out of his reach, bolting for the door. But as I threw it open, I stopped dead in my tracks. More of them were waiting in the hallway. Dozens of them. Rotting corpses with hollow eyes that burned with hatred, all of them staring at me with a malevolent hunger. They had come for me, for what I had done. I slammed the door shut, my mind racing. There had to be a way out, a way to survive. But I was trapped, surrounded on all sides by the vengeful dead. Their whispers echoed through the walls, growing louder with each passing second. They were calling to me, reminding me of every sin, every secret that had been buried along with them. And then, in the midst of the chaos, I remembered something. Something that had been whispered among the older folks in town, something we had all dismissed as a myth. The witch. They said the cemetery was cursed, that a witch had been buried there centuries ago, and her spirit lingered, seeking revenge on those who had wronged her. No one believed the stories, not really. But now I wasn't so sure. Maybe the curse was real. Maybe we had awakened something far worse than we could ever imagine. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to go to the cemetery, to the witch's grave. Maybe there was a way to stop this, a way to make it right. I took a deep breath, knowing what I had to do. I grabbed the flashlight from my bedside table and shoved open the window, climbing out onto the roof. The dead were still at the door, pounding and scraping, but they hadn't noticed me slipping out. Not yet. I dropped down to the ground below, landing hard but keeping my balance. The cemetery wasn't far, just a few blocks away. If I could make it there, maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to stop this nightmare. I took off running, the cold night air biting at my skin. The streets were eerily empty, save for the occasional shadow moving in the distance. More of the dead, wandering aimlessly. Through town. They hadn't seen me yet, but I could feel their presence, their cold, hateful eyes searching for me. As I approached the cemetery gates, a thick fog began to roll in, swirling around the gravestones like ghostly tendrils. The air was heavy with the stench of death and the whispers. They were louder now, clearer. They were calling me by name. I hesitated at the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to go in. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run. But I couldn't. There was no running from this. The only way out was through. I stepped through the gates, the iron creaking as they swung shut behind me. The fog was so thick now that I could barely see a few feet in front of me. But I knew where I needed to go. The witch's grave was at the far end of the cemetery, marked by a twisted, blackened tree that had never grown a single leaf. I forced myself to move forward, each step feeling heavier than the last. The ground squelched beneath my feet, the earth soft and wet as though freshly dug. And then, just ahead, I saw it, the tree. Its gnarled branches reached up toward the sky like skeletal fingers, and at its base, a crumbling headstone marked the witch's final resting place. I approached slowly, my flashlight flickering as though the very air around me was draining its power. I knelt down by the grave, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "How do I stop this?" But there was no answer, only the cold, suffocating silence. And then, as if in response to my question, the ground beneath me began to shift. The earth trembled and I stumbled back, my heart racing as cracks began to form around the grave. And then with a sickening lurch, the ground split open and something began to rise from the dirt. But it wasn't the witch. It was me. A figure identical to me, same clothes, same face, crawled out of the earth, its eyes hollow and filled with the same hatred I had seen in Roger's. I screamed, stumbling backward as the thing stood, a twisted smile spreading across its face. "You can't run from yourself," it whispered, its voice a twisted echo of my own. You're already dead.